Hello family, welcome to Stories with JAYVIL. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and remember to turn on the post notifications so you don't miss any future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Now sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Once upon a time in the bustling city of Nairobi, Kenya, Emma Wilson, a passionate young fashion designer, found herself at a quaint little cafe tucked away from the chaos of the city. She often came here for inspiration, sketching designs in her worn-out notebook while sipping on a cup of hot chai. It was a place of peace, a haven where her dreams felt closer and her worries seemed to fade. On this particular day, Emma was deeply engrossed in her sketches, her pencil moving swiftly across the page. She didn't notice the man who had just entered the cafe, his tailored suit and confident stride contrasting with the laid-back ambience. Alexander Reed, a successful entrepreneur known for his sharp business acumen, was looking for a quiet place to unwind after a stressful morning of meetings. The cafe's charm pulled him in, offering a brief escape from the relentless demands of his world. Alexander's eyes scanned the room, landing on Emma's table. Her concentration and the intricate sketches in her notebook piqued his curiosity. Unable to resist, he walked over. "Excuse me," Alexander said, his deep voice startling Emma. She looked up, meeting his piercing brown eyes. "I couldn't help but notice your work. It's incredible." Emma blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the compliment. "Oh, thank you," she replied, her voice soft but warm. She moved her notebook slightly, self-conscious under his gaze. "Are you a designer?" he asked, genuinely interested. "Trying to be," she admitted with a shy smile. "I'm still building my portfolio, hoping to open my own boutique one day." Alexander pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "That's impressive. I'm Alexander, by the way." "Emma," she replied, shaking his outstretched hand. What started as a casual exchange turned into a 2-hour conversation. They talked about everything from Emma's love for fashion to Alexander's journey in the business world. Alexander was captivated by Emma's passion and determination, while Emma found Alexander's confidence and charm intriguing. As the conversation flowed, they discovered they had more in common than they expected. Both had faced challenges that shaped their paths. Emma shared how she had to work multiple jobs to support her dream, while Alexander recounted his struggles to establish himself in a competitive market. "I admire your drive," Alexander said, his gaze sincere. "It's not easy to chase your dreams, especially in a world that doesn't always make space for them." Emma smiled, her heart warming at his words. "And I admire your success. It gives me hope that hard work pays off." When they finally parted ways, Alexander handed Emma his card. "If you ever need advice or someone to bounce ideas off, give me a call." Emma hesitated but took the card, slipping it into her bag. As she walked home that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. And she was right. That chance encounter was the beginning of a story neither of them would ever forget. Emma spent the following days replaying her encounter with Alexander. His words lingered in her mind, offering a sense of encouragement she hadn't felt in a long time. She debated whether to call him, but a mixture of doubt and pride held her back. Meanwhile, Alexander couldn't get Emma out of his head. There was something about her that stood apart, her ambition, her authenticity. Used to being surrounded by people driven by material gains, Emma's purity of purpose was refreshing. One evening, Emma received a text message. "Alexander, hi Emma. I hope I'm not interrupting. I was wondering if you'd like to meet for coffee sometime. I'd love to hear more about your designs." Emma's heart raced. She stared at her phone, debating whether to respond immediately or play it cool. Ultimately, her excitement won. "Emma, hi Alexander, not interrupting at all. Coffee sounds great. When are you free?" They agreed to meet at the same cafe where their paths had crossed. Emma arrived early, her nerves getting the better of her. She wore a simple yet elegant dress she had designed herself, a reminder of her passion. When Alexander arrived, his warm smile immediately put her at ease. They ordered their drinks and settled into a comfortable conversation. "I've been thinking about your designs," Alexander began. "Have you ever considered showcasing your work at an exhibition or a fashion show?" Emma blinked, surprised by his suggestion. I've thought about it, but I don't have the resources or connections to make it happen. Alexander leaned forward, his expression serious. Emma, your talent deserves to be seen. If you're willing, I'd like to help. Emma was taken aback. Why would you that? You barely know me, he smiled. True, but I know enough to see your potential. Sometimes all it takes is someone believing in you to make a difference. Her heart softened at his sincerity. Thank you, Alexander. That means a lot. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened. Alexander introduced Emma to influential people in the fashion industry, helped her secure funding for her first small showcase, and even attended her late-night brainstorming sessions. Their professional partnership soon blossomed into a friendship. They shared laughs over their favorite meals, supported each other through challenges, and found comfort in each other's presence. One evening, after a successful meeting with a boutique owner interested in Emma's designs, Alexander drove her home. As they sat in the car outside her apartment, a moment of silence lingered between them. You've changed my life, Alexander, Emma said softly. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. He turned to her, his eyes filled with warmth. You don't have to. Seeing you thrive is more than enough. Their gazes locked, and for a brief moment it felt as though time stood still. But Emma quickly looked away, her cheeks flushed. Good night, Alexander, she said, stepping out of the car. Good night, Emma, he replied, watching her disappear into the building. As he drove away, Alexander couldn't ignore the growing feelings in his heart. Little did they know, their journey had only just begun, and it would soon take a turn neither of them expected. Over the next few months, Emma's designs gained attention in the local fashion scene. Her small showcases turned into bigger opportunities, and she began to build a name for herself. But with success came challenges. One evening after a particularly demanding day, Emma invited Alexander to celebrate at her apartment. They sat on her modest sofa, sharing takeout and recounting the milestones of the past few weeks. I can't believe this is happening, Emma said, her eyes shining. Sometimes I wonder if I'll wake up and it'll all be a dream. Alexander chuckled. It's not a dream, Emma. It's the result of your talent and hard work. I'm just glad I could play a small part. Emma looked at him, her expression softening. Small part, Alexander? You've been my biggest supporter. I don't think I would have made it this far without you. Alexander's gaze lingered on her. Emma, you don't give yourself enough credit. You're extraordinary. The room grew quiet, the unspoken tension between them becoming palpable. Before either could say more, Emma's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. She glanced at the screen and sighed. It's from an old friend. He wants to catch up, she said, brushing it off. Alexander nodded, but something in his demeanor shifted. You should go. It's important to stay connected with people who've been part of your journey. Emma tilted her head. You say that like it's easy. My past isn't something I like revisiting. Why not? He asked, leaning forward. She hesitated, then sighed. It's complicated. There's someone I cared about a long time ago. He left and I've tried to move on, but it's not always easy. Alexander's jaw tightened. Does he still matter to you? Emma met his eyes. Not in the way he used to, but it's hard to forget how much someone meant to you, even if they hurt you. Alexander nodded, his expression unreadable. Well, for what it's worth, anyone who could walk away from you doesn't deserve you. Emma smiled faintly. Thank you, Alexander. That means a lot. Despite her gratitude, the conversation left an unease between them. Emma couldn't help but wonder why Alexander seemed so affected by her past. And Alexander, though unwilling to admit it, was beginning to realize just how deeply he cared for her. The following week, Emma attended a networking event, her confidence growing with every introduction. She noticed Alexander across the room speaking with a group of influential designers. Their eyes met and he excused himself to join her. You're the star tonight, he said, his voice full of pride. Emma laughed lightly. I wouldn't have come this far without you. Maybe, he replied, but this is your moment, Emma. Own it. As the evening progressed, they found themselves dancing together. The music faded into the background as they moved in sync, their connection undeniable. Emma, Alexander began, his voice low, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. But before he could continue, they were interrupted by a familiar voice. Emma, she turned to see a man standing nearby, his face a ghost from her past. It was Lucas, her ex-boyfriend, and the sight of him sent a jolt through her. "Lucas," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Alexander watched the interaction, his protective instincts kicking in. "Friend of yours?" he asked, his tone measured. Emma hesitated. "We knew each other a long time ago." Lucas extended a hand to Alexander. "I'm Lucas, and you are?" "Alexander," he replied, shaking Lucas's hand firmly. The tension was thick, but Emma quickly diffused it. "Lucas, it's good to see you. Excuse me, I need a moment." She walked away, leaving Alexander and Lucas standing awkwardly. Alexander's eyes followed her, his chest tightening with a mix of jealousy and concern. Lucas smirked. "You're close to her, huh?" Alexander's jaw clenched. "You could say that." "Well, good luck," Lucas said casually. "Emma's not easy to win over." As Lucas walked away, Alexander vowed silently to protect Emma from whatever pain her past might bring, and to ensure she knew she wasn't alone anymore. Emma leaned against the balcony railing, the cool evening breeze brushing her face. The sight of Lucas had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. It wasn't just his sudden appearance, it was the flood of memories he brought with him. "Mind if I join you?" Alexander's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing at the doorway, his expression soft. "Of course," she said, gesturing for him to come closer. Alexander stepped beside her, his hands resting on the railing. "You okay?" Emma nodded, though her voice betrayed her unease. "Just unexpected seeing him again." "Do you want to talk out it?" Alexander asked gently. Emma hesitated, then sighed. "Lucas and I had something years ago. It was intense, but it didn't end well. He left when I needed him most, and I never really got closure." Alexander frowned. "And now he just shows up out of nowhere." She shrugged. "It's his style, I guess. But it doesn't matter. I've moved on." "Have you?" Alexander asked, his tone careful. Emma looked at him sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" Alexander held her gaze. "It means you deserve better than someone who left you behind. And if he's here to mess with your head, I'm not going to let him." Emma softened. "Thank you, Alexander. I mean it, but I can handle this." Alexander nodded, though his jaw remained tight. "I know you can. Just remember, you're not alone." For a moment, they stood in silence, the unspoken tension between them as heavy as the night air. The next day, Emma tried to throw herself into her work, but Lucas's reappearance lingered in her mind. It didn't help that he called her that afternoon, his voice as smooth as she remembered. "Emma, can we talk?" Lucas asked. "I don't think that's a good idea," she replied, her tone clipped. "Please," he said. "I owe you an explanation. Just give me a chance." Against her better judgment, Emma agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe. When she arrived, Lucas was already seated, his trademark charm on full display. "Emma," he said, standing as she approached. "You look amazing." "Cut the flattery, Lucas," she replied, sitting down. "What do you want?" He sighed, leaning forward. "I want to apologize for everything. Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life." Emma laughed bitterly. "And now you show up years later expecting what?" "Forgiveness." "I don't expect anything," Lucas said earnestly. "I just needed you to know how sorry I am." Emma stared at him, her emotions swirling. Part of her wanted to believe him, but another part remembered the pain he'd caused. "I've built a new life, Lucas," she said firmly, "and I'm not sure you have a place in it." Lucas nodded, though his eyes betrayed his disappointment. "I understand. But if there's any way I can make it up to you." "There isn't," Emma interrupted. "Goodbye, Lucas." She stood and walked away, her heart pounding. She didn't see Alexander watching from across the street, his expression unreadable. Later that evening, Emma found herself at Alexander's apartment, seeking the comfort of his presence. "Rough day?" he asked, handing her a glass of wine. "You could say that," she replied, sinking into the couch. Alexander sat beside her, his gaze steady. "You saw him, didn't you?" Emma nodded. "I thought I needed closure, but I was wrong. He's still the same Lucas, selfish and full of excuses." Alexander reached out, placing a hand on hers. "You deserve so much more, Emma." She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Alexander, for always being there." "Always," he said softly, his thumb brushing her hand. For the first time in years, Emma felt truly safe. But as she looked into Alexander's eyes, she wondered if her heart was ready for the new possibilities that lay ahead, or if her past would continue to haunt her. The following days were a whirlwind for Emma. She tried to shake off the lingering tension Lucas's arrival had caused, but his shadow loomed large. She busied herself with work, lunches with friends, and evenings with Alexander, who had become her anchor in the storm. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset, Alexander broke the silence. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course," she replied, turning to him. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "What is it about Lucas that still has this hold on you?" Emma blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not sure it's him exactly. It's what he represented. I was so young, so full of hope. I thought we'd conquer the world together." Alexander's voice was steady. "And now? Now I know better," she said with a rueful smile. "He wasn't who I thought he was, and honestly, I wasn't who I am now." Alexander reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm glad you found yourself. You're incredible, Emma." Her heart skipped a beat at the sincerity in his tone. "Thank you, Alexander. You've been my rock through all of this." He leaned closer, his eyes locking onto hers. "I want to be more than that." The words hung in the air between them, charged with emotion. Emma felt her breath catch as she searched his face, looking for any trace of doubt. There was none. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Alexander smiled softly. "That's okay. I'm not going anywhere." Meanwhile, Lucas wasn't ready to give up. Despite Emma's clear dismissal, he persisted, showing up at places he knew she frequented, leaving her voicemails and even dropping flowers at her office. Emma's patience finally snapped when she found him waiting outside her yoga class one evening. "What are you doing here, Lucas?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "I just want to talk," he pleaded. "Emma, I can't stop thinking about you." "Maybe you should try," she shot back. "You lost the right to be in my life a long time ago." "People can change," Lucas insisted. Emma shook her head, her expression hard. "Maybe they can, but that doesn't mean they get a second chance." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Lucas standing alone. For the first time, she felt a sense of finality. The door to that chapter of her life had closed, and she had no intention of reopening it. Later that night, she called Alexander. "Can you come over?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Of course," he replied without hesitation. When he arrived, she met him at the door and pulled him into a tight hug. "I just needed to see you," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. He held her close, his hand gently stroking her hair. "I'm here, Emma, always." As they sat together on the couch, Emma realized something she hadn't before. For so long, she had been holding on to the idea of what could have been. But Alexander had shown her what could be, something real, something kind, something worth fighting for. For the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to imagine a future free from the shadows of her past. And in that future, Alexander was by her side. Weeks passed and Emma's life began to settle into a rhythm. She spent more time with Alexander, cherishing his calming presence and unyielding support. It felt as though she was finally stepping out of the storm that had defined her past. But just as she was starting to embrace her new normal, an envelope arrived that threatened to shatter her peace. It was a gilded wedding invitation. Emma stared at the elegant cursive letters spelling out Lucas's name alongside someone she didn't recognize. The ceremony was to be held at an opulent venue in the heart of the city. She laughed bitterly, the sound hollow in the quiet of her apartment. "After all this, he wants me to celebrate his happy ending," she thought. That evening, Alexander found her pacing the living room, the invitation lying on the coffee table. He picked it up and read it silently before looking at her. "You're not seriously considering going, are you?" he asked, his tone measured. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me thinks it would be closure. The other part of me wants to burn it." Alexander smirked. "I'd vote for the latter." She sighed, sitting down on the couch. "What does he even want from me? Why invite me?" "Maybe he's trying to prove something," Alexander suggested. "Or maybe he's trying to manipulate you again." Emma ran her fingers through her hair. What if it's neither? What if he's just... Moving on, Alexander sat beside her, taking her hand. "Do you want to go?" Emma hesitated. "I don't know. I hate the idea of him still having this power over me." But at the same time, I kind of want him to see that I've moved on too. Alexander's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Then go, show him how strong you've become. The day of the wedding arrived faster than Emma expected. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the deep green dress she had chosen. It was simple yet elegant, accentuating her confidence rather than trying to make a statement. As she applied the final touches to her makeup, her phone buzzed. It was Alexander. "I just wanted to say you look amazing," he said, his voice warm through the line. "You haven't even seen me yet," Emma teased. "I don't have to, I know," he replied. "And remember, you owe him nothing." "I know," she said, her voice steady. "Thank you, Alexander." When she arrived at the venue, the grandeur of it all hit her. Crystal chandeliers, flowing white linens, and an air of sophistication enveloped the room. Emma took a deep breath, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she walked inside. The moment Lucas saw her, his expression faltered. He excused himself from his new bride and approached Emma with a nervous smile. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice low. Emma met his gaze squarely. "Why wouldn't I? You invited me." He looked down as if searching for the right words. "I wanted you to see that I've changed. That I'm happy." Emma smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "Good, you should be." Lucas seemed taken aback by her calmness. "You really are different, Emma." "Maybe I am," she said. "And maybe that's why I'm here. To say goodbye to what was and hello to what's ahead." Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a small voice interrupted. "Mommy," Emma turned, her face lighting up as her son, Noah, ran up to her. She bent down, scooping him into her arms as Lucas stood frozen, staring at the boy who was unmistakably his mirror image. The room seemed to grow quieter as realization dawned on Lucas. But Emma didn't stay to explain. Holding Noah close, she walked away, her head held high. For the first time in years, Emma felt truly free. Emma walked through the elegantly decorated hall, Noah clinging to her hand. She could feel the weight of Lucas's gaze burning into her back, but she refused to turn around. The soft hum of the wedding chatter seemed to dim as whispers began to ripple across the room. Guests were beginning to notice the striking resemblance between Noah and Lucas. "Emma," Lucas called out, his voice tinged with urgency. Emma stopped. She turned around slowly, her expression calm and composed. "Yes?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Lucas's eyes darted to Noah and back to Emma. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Is he mine?" Emma crouched down to Noah's level, brushing a strand of his hair out of his face. "Noah, sweetheart, why don't you go sit over there for a moment?" she said, pointing to an empty chair near the corner of the room. Noah nodded, smiling innocently, and skipped away. Emma stood, her gaze piercing as she faced Lucas. "You lost the right to ask that question the moment you walked away from me," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. Lucas's face paled. "Emma, please, I need to know." "You need to know," Emma echoed, laughing bitterly. "You needed to know when I told you I was pregnant all those years ago. You needed to know when I begged you not to leave. But you didn't care then, so why do you care now?" Lucas took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I made mistakes, Emma. I was young and stupid. But if he's my son," Emma cut him off, her voice rising slightly. "If he's your son, what? You'll suddenly become a father. You'll suddenly care." The room fell silent. Guests were now openly watching the confrontation. Lucas's new bride stood frozen at the edge of the room, her expression a mix of shock and confusion. "I deserve to know the truth," Lucas said, his voice trembling. Emma took a deep breath, willing herself to stay composed. "Fine, yes, Lucas, he's your son. But you don't deserve him." Lucas staggered back as though he'd been punched. His eyes flicked to Noah, who was happily playing with a napkin at the table, blissfully unaware of the tension surrounding him. He's mine," Lucas whispered, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emma laughed humorlessly. "Tell you? You walked out, Lucas. You didn't care about me or what I was going through. And honestly, I did tell you. You just chose not to listen." "I didn't know," Lucas began, but Emma held up a hand to stop him. "You knew enough. You knew I needed you and you left anyway. Noah and I don't need you now." Lucas's new wife, who had been watching from the sidelines, finally stepped forward. "Lucas, what's going on?" she demanded. Emma glanced at the woman, her expression softening slightly. You might want to ask your husband, she said before turning to leave. Lucas reached out as if to stop her. Emma, wait, please. I want to make this right. Emma turned back, her eyes blazing. You can't. Some things can't be undone, Lucas. You made your choice and I made mine. Noah and I are just fine without you. With that, she walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor. As she reached Noah, she scooped him up in her arms, kissing his forehead. Let's go, sweetheart, she said softly. Okay, Mommy, Noah replied, resting his head on her shoulder. As Emma left the wedding, a wave of relief washed over her. She had faced her past and emerged stronger. The man who had once broken her was now just a distant memory. Her focus was on the future, her future and Noah's. And for the first time in years, Emma felt truly free. Lucas stood frozen in the middle of the hall as Emma and Noah disappeared through the grand double doors. The silence in the room was deafening. All eyes were on him, including those of his new bride, Clara. Her confusion quickly turned to anger as she crossed the room, her hands balled into fists. Lucas, Clara said, her voice cold and firm, is it true? Is that boy your son? Lucas looked at her, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to find the words. Clara, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Clara's eyes narrowed. You didn't know? Or you didn't care to know? Her voice rose, and the guests exchanged glances, sensing the drama was far from over. You knew there was a possibility, didn't you? I was young. I made mistakes, Lucas stammered, his usual charm failing him. I thought she'd moved on. Moved on? Clara's laughter was sharp and humorless. Lucas, you abandoned her, and now, on our wedding day, I find out you have a child with someone else? She threw her bouquet onto the floor, her frustration boiling over. What kind of man are you? Meanwhile, Emma sat in the back seat of the car with Noah, her heart racing. She had never intended to create such a scene, but part of her felt a strange sense of satisfaction. For years she had carried the weight of Lucas's betrayal alone. Now he was the one left to face the consequences of his actions. Mommy, who was that man? Noah asked, his innocent voice pulling her out of her thoughts. Emma hesitated, stroking his cheek. He's someone from my past, sweetheart. Someone who made some bad choices. Was he a bad man? Noah asked, his big brown eyes wide with curiosity. Emma smiled softly. Not bad, just not someone we need in our lives. Noah nodded, satisfied with her answer, and turned his attention to the toy car in his lap. Emma stared out the window, her mind swirling with thoughts. She had spent years building a stable life for herself and Noah, and she wasn't about to let Lucas disrupt that. Back at the wedding venue, Clara stormed out, leaving Lucas standing alone in front of the stunned guests. His best man, James, approached him cautiously. You really messed up, mate, James said, shaking his head. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, his usual confidence shattered. I didn't know she kept a baby, James. If I had known, James sighed. You can't change the past, Lucas, but you need to figure out what kind of man you want to be moving forward. Right now, you're just digging a deeper hole. Lucas nodded, his mind racing. He knew he had to see Emma again, not to win her back, but to try to make amends. For Noah, if nothing else. That night, Emma put Noah to bed and sat in the quiet of her living room, sipping tea and replaying the events of the day. She had spent years preparing herself for the possibility of running into Lucas, but nothing could have prepared her for today. Her phone buzzed and her heart sank as she saw Lucas's name on the screen. Reluctantly, she answered. Emma, Lucas's voice was low and filled with regret. I know I don't deserve it, but can we talk? Just you and me, please. Emma hesitated, her grip tightening on the phone. Finally, she said, tomorrow, 1 hour. That's all you get. Thank you, Lucas whispered before the line went dead. Emma stared at the phone, a mix of emotions coursing through her. Tomorrow would be the final chapter of their story, one way or another. The next morning, Emma found herself pacing nervously in the quiet cafe where she had agreed to meet Lucas. The soft hum of conversations and the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts were on the man she once loved, the man who had left her with nothing but heartbreak and unanswered questions. Lucas arrived, his usual confident stride subdued. He spotted Emma in the corner, her expression unreadable, and approached cautiously. Emma, he began, his voice tentative. Lucas, she replied, gesturing for him to sit. I don't have all day, so get to the point. He sighed, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. I owe you an apology, a real one. I know I hurt you and I've carried that guilt for years. Emma crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. You didn't just hurt me, Lucas, you broke me. You left without a word, knowing I was pregnant. Do you have any idea what that was like? I didn't know, Lucas admitted, his voice cracking. When I left, I thought you'd be better off without me. I was scared, selfish, and stupid, but I swear, Emma, I didn't know about Noah. Emma let out a bitter laugh. You didn't know because you didn't care to find out. You didn't even give me the chance to tell you. Lucas looked down, shame etched into his features. You're right, I was a coward. But now I want to make things right. Emma shook her head, her voice filled with emotion. You can't just waltz back into my life and expect to fix everything. Noah isn't just a name or an idea. He's a little boy with feelings, a boy who's asked me 100 times why he doesn't have a father. I want to meet him, Lucas said, his tone earnest. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to know my son. I want to be part of his life. Emma stared at him, her heart torn. Part of her wanted to believe he had changed, but another part feared letting him in would only lead to more pain for her and Noah. Lucas, she said after a long pause, Noah is my world. I've spent years protecting him from disappointment, from people who don't stick around. If you want to be in his life, you have to prove to me that you're serious, that you're not going to hurt him the way you hurt me. I'll do whatever it takes, Lucas promised, leaning forward. I'll be there for him for you. Please just give me a chance. Emma looked away, tears welling up in her eyes. She had waited so long for this moment, yet it was nothing like she imagined. Could she trust Lucas again? Could she risk her son's heart on a man who had already broken hers? I'll think about it, she said finally, her voice trembling. But don't expect miracles, Lucas. Trust takes time, and you have a lot to make up for. Lucas nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Thank you, Emma. That's all I ask. As he left the cafe, Emma sat in silence, her emotions a whirlwind. She knew the road ahead would be complicated, but for Noah's sake, she was willing to consider opening the door she had vowed to keep shut forever. A week passed before Emma decided to let Lucas meet Noah. She arranged the meeting at a park where Noah loved to play. It was a safe space, open and filled with other families, a place where she felt comfortable letting her guard down just a little. Lucas arrived early, nervously pacing near the swings. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, and his usually confident demeanor was replaced by visible anxiety. When he saw Emma walking toward him, holding Noah's hand, his breath caught in his throat. Noah, with his bright smile and curious eyes, was the spitting image of Lucas. It was like looking into a mirror of his younger self. Lucas swallowed hard, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Hey buddy, Lucas said, crouching to Noah's level. I'm Lucas. Noah looked up at his mother, seeking reassurance. Emma gave him a small nod and squeezed his hand. It's okay, sweetheart. Hi, Noah said shyly, his voice barely above a whisper. Lucas smiled, his heart aching at the thought of all the moments he had missed. You know, you look just like me when I was your age. Handsome and full of mischief. Noah giggled, the ice breaking just a little. Mom says I'm handsome too. She's absolutely right, Lucas said, glancing at Emma. Your mom's a very smart woman. Emma stayed quiet, watching the interaction closely. She couldn't deny the warmth spreading through her chest as she saw Noah begin to open up. Do you like soccer? Lucas asked, pointing to a ball nearby. Noah's face lit up. I love it. Well, how about we kick the ball around for a bit? Lucas suggested. Noah nodded eagerly, and soon the two were running across the grass, laughing and shouting. Emma watched from a distance, her heart a mix of hope and caution. She couldn't deny that Lucas seemed genuine, but trust wasn't something she could give freely anymore. After an hour of playing, Noah ran back to Emma, his cheeks flushed with excitement. Mom, Lucas is really good at soccer. He said he'll teach me how to score goals. Emma smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Noah's face. That sounds fun, sweetheart. Lucas approached, his expression soft. Thank you for letting me meet him, Emma. He's an incredible kid. He is, Emma agreed. But this is just the beginning, Lucas. If you won't be part of his life, it's going to take time and effort. No more disappearing acts, I understand, Lucas said earnestly. I'm here to stay, for both of you. Emma looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception. What she saw instead was sincerity, perhaps even regret. She nodded slowly. Then we'll take it one step at a time. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the three of them walked together, a tentative family on the cusp of healing. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Emma felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, some stories could have a second chance at a happy ending. We've come to the end of this story. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. Thank you.